The power of one. The power of two. The power of many.
Because I think if you don't know what this world of Star Wars, the High Republic, is like, which we haven't seen in live action, you have to understand that the Jedi are not the Jedi that they are in the prequels.
In your show, I am. Included me in this shit show you have.
And they're also operating with, I think, a little more hubris. Like, of course, we're doing the right thing. We're doing the right thing.
I want to do what's best for Osha.
You don't get to decide that.
Huh?
Mama! We're doing the right thing. This is how we've always done it, and that's the right thing.
I'm sorry. I must face the council.
Why would you do that to her? We will tell the council the truth. May burned down the witch's fortress, and everyone was lost.
Mama!
We'll put it this way, she was thinking emotionally, like she was definitely... She's like, it's okay. It's interesting. It plays out very interestingly in the next episode.
Granting creative control to radically alter the Star Wars universe might not have been a stellar decision, as evidenced by the ACOLYTE's first season finale. The show concluded with a cliffhanger that suggested more episodes are on the horizon in a new season, despite the series struggling to wrap up its own narrative in any meaningful way over its 8-episode run. Leslie Headland has destructively attempted to reinvent the wheel, which has led the series down a confounding path that not only misaligns with the franchise's history, but in many cases destroys the established canon, lore, and characters. It's becoming clearer that this is a piece of fan fiction written by people who both don't understand or like Star Wars and have instead used it as a vessel to insert their identity politics and intersectionality to deconstruct the meaning of right and wrong. 12 years after Disney's acquisition, the company's stewardship has led the franchise astray, transforming the galaxy far, far away into a shadow of its former self. And to me, the ACOLYTE is the lowest point. Not only does it commit canonical transgressions, with Ki-Adi-Mundi lying about there not being a Sith, Darth Plagueis now implied as learning how to manipulate the Force to create life from Osha, and Yoda not sensing the death of multiple Jedi, but it suffers from an array of other structural storytelling flaws, including nonsensical plot developments, wooden performances, contrivances, and inexplicable switching of character motivations, loyalties, and objectives on a whim. Not to mention that each episode costs roughly $22.5 million, for a total budget of $180 million across 8 episodes in what can only be described as money laundering, especially given the fact that the 90-minute Godzilla -1 film cost only $15 million, in addition to the ACOLYTE being more expensive than some of the priciest TV shows of all time, from The Pacific, House of the Dragon, to Game of Thrones. It's just a waste of money that can't be justified. Another one of my biggest problems with the show is that throughout the ACOLYTE, the portrayal of Jedi shifts dramatically. Traditionally seen as guardians of peace and justice, they're instead depicted as antagonistic figures, a major deviation that aligns with the show's broader theme of moral relativism. I think the shift is epitomized in a line from Mother Anastasia, who asserts,
This isn't about good or bad. This is about power and who is allowed to use it.
encapsulating the departure from the classic good versus evil dichotomy and introducing a nihilistic perspective that pervades the narrative. My viewing experience was fraught with frustration, marked by confusion over plot developments and a sense of betrayal to the creative vision originally established by George Lucas. The series not only challenges the foundational elements of Star Wars, but does so in a manner that leaves little room for the hopeful, uplifting themes traditionally celebrated in the saga.
Of course, when we seeing them on Brendok and seeing how they negotiate the issue with the witches and how, what does Osha want, and what does she want, more than her present moral code would allow, when would her...
That
What would her present moral code crumble under if she was offered? And I think for Osha, it's something more emotional. That's where you get the subverting expectations and the don't tell me anything and, blow my mind. I mean,
Oh my God! Wow!
if you're engaging in the story and you're starting to see where it's going and you...
Oh my God, bro.
Oh, hell no.
whether you're excited about that direction or not, I can't. That's not my business. That's not my business. But
I believe she used the Force to create you and the ocean.
yeah, non-canon canon is the best kind of canon.
Hey guys, what's happening? Nihat here with Film Comics Explained. And today, it pains me to wrap up our coverage of the worst Star Wars property since Disney's acquisition of the franchise.
I sort of moved that treasure trove of stories and various things to Kathy, and I have complete confidence that she's going to take them and make great movies.
And we're in the midst of the really fun part of the process, which is we're sitting down with a couple of writers and we're starting to discuss ideas and we're starting to talk about what those stories might be.
Anakin actually wasn't the first to be created by the Force. There was a group of illustrious witches about 100 years earlier, all of whom were intense, prideful activists ahead of their time and far superior to the Jedi.
Titled Choice, the penultimate episode was supposed to provide long-awaited answers and connect the entire series together, but instead spiraled into further convolution, sparking more questions than it resolved. Set against the backdrop of Brendok, it endeavors to retell the pivotal night when the witches met their demise, promising a deep dive into the murky waters of Jedi morality. However, what was billed as a revelation turned out to be more of a rehash of Episode 3. We're transported back to that fateful night, viewing the chaos from the Jedi's perspective, an opportunity ripe for exploring the grays between the dark and the light. Yet the episode flounders, delivering a plot that feels less like an exploration of complex moral dilemmas and more like a rushed sequence of unfortunate events. Once again, we find ourselves adrift in a sea of convolution, tasked with piecing together a jigsaw where half the pieces seem to belong to another puzzle altogether. We find Jedi Masters Indara, Saul, Kelnaka, and Padawan Torben on the once barren but now flourishing planet, armed with antiquated tools like metal detectors and sample gear. One wonders why a simple photographic transmission to their Jedi counterparts on Coruscant wouldn't suffice to demonstrate the planet's miraculous resurgence, but I digress.
We'll split up then. So, follow the river. We haven't covered the Northlands yet. Meet us back at the camp.
Okay. But if only I knew that what we were doing was somehow important or meaningful.
Saul, with the enthusiasm of a child in a sandbox, collects samples like the limited edition action figures, stashing them into a metal container like he's safeguarding precious treasures. As if to emphasize the mundane, Master Indara activates a scanner. Oh, the excitement. While monitoring data that's probably as riveting as watching paint dry. Meanwhile, Kelnaka, possibly mistaking the expedition for a gold hunt, uses a long instrument to survey the grass, while Torben fumbles with samples in an analyzer machine that might as well be a glorified blender. The writers have forgotten that they are Jedi with the ability to sense the Force, and bizarrely have them wielding equipment to do this job for them.
So uncivilized.
Night falls and our heroes gather around a campfire. Here, Kelnaka serves up a culinary challenge, Nuna legs, the space equivalent of mystery meat. Torben, whose palate apparently dreams of finer fare, balks at the prospect of another gamey meal and whinges for the cosmopolitan comforts of Coruscant.
I don't like
eating Nuna legs.
It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
It's unwise to insult a Wookiee's cooking.
This is the penultimate episode, by the way. Master Indara, ever the voice of reason, reminds him that rejecting a Wookiee's cooking might lead to more than indigestion. It could hurt feelings. Big, furry feelings. Torben's discontent isn't just culinary. He's fed up with the mission's lack of excitement. 7 weeks on Brendok, and the most thrilling discovery is that the planet isn't actually dead. It's just boring.
I want to go home to Coruscant, and there's no one here, and if we were going to find something, we probably would have found it by now.
I hate it here! I want to go home!
What kind of Padawan complains like this and instead isn't thankful to be accompanying their master? In an attempt to inspire, Indara waxes poetic about vergences, focal points of force energy that might explain the sudden botanical boom, while Saul chimes in, philosophizing about life and its mysteries, trying to sell the importance of their botanical survey as if it's a blockbuster revelation. As the narrative continues, the next day offers no reprieve. Kelnaka continues his impersonation of a forestry inspector. Torben keeps playing lab assistant, and Saul and Indara delve into a philosophical debate about distractions and the path to Jedi wisdom. To ease his mind, Indara insists that Torben find his own answers, contradicting the previous scene where she literally gave him the answer.
I do not tell him answers to ease his mind. I teach him to seek the answers for himself.
What's divergence?
A concentration of force energy centered around a location.
And when Sol sighs wistfully, likely realizing the episode's potential ratings plummet, Indara delivers a zinger about why she, not he, has a Padawan.
That's why I have a Padawan and you do not.
Through this saga of vegetative investigation and existential musings, one can't help but wonder, why is the second last episode wasted on this instead of tying up the loose ends of everything that came before?
Sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say the Punchable Face says something that's absolutely correct here. He said that this should have been episode 3, and I completely agree, because what was lacking throughout the entire season was a lack of context. We had no idea what the motivations and objectives of the characters were, and this would have at least answered those questions for us.
Oh, yeah, it feels like they recut it desperately to try and make some sort of mystery box out of it, and it's a terrible failure.
Indara, perhaps hoping to find something, anything more stimulating than the local flora, sends Sol off to the uncharted Northlands. Armed with nothing but a speeder bike and the kind of optimism that only a Jedi can muster, Sol zooms away, leaving a trail of dust and low expectations. Upon dismounting his trusty mechanical steed near the ruins entwined with a bunta tree, his mundane mission takes a sharp turn into a poorly scripted drama. Here he stumbles upon May and Osha, embroiled in the kind of sibling squabble you would expect.
Let it go, May. Stop!
May, using her nascent force skills, traps a butterfly, prompting a scolding from Osha. You might be thinking we've already seen this, and you're right, we have, much like most of the episode. The familial drama unfolds as Mother Coral, once again, scolds the children for their woodland escapade. Sol, ever the spy, eavesdrops and then contacts Master Indara with the shocking revelation they're not alone. He then tracks Coral and the twins to the Brendok fortress that they somehow managed to overlook as they landed on the planet, despite it being only a few miles away from the Jedi and the building sticking out like a sore thumb.
Look at him, he's heading for that small moon.
I think I can get him before he gets there. He's almost in range.
That's no moon.
Inside, the plot thickens, or at least attempts to. From a conveniently placed hiding spot, Sol spies on Mother Anastasia training the twins. The session is interrupted when Coral senses something amiss and investigates, but Sol remains as unseen as the show's budget constraints. He also discovers a congregation of what he labels witches performing a ritual, and voices his concerns about the witchy proceedings and the safety of the twins to his team. Torben wonders aloud if these are Night Sisters, which prompts a growl from Kelnaka. Apparently, Wookiees are critics too.
A force cult here.
I think they're witches.
Night Sisters.
Hey, we do not have all the information.
You sure about that? You sure about that? You sure about that?
Indara, cautious as ever, proposes consulting the Jedi High Council, but Sol, driven by a hero complex, insists they must intervene immediately. In what can only be described as a failed attempt at a Jedi stealth operation, our quartet of Force users zoom towards the mountain fortress, primed for an episode packed with as much subtlety as a Wookiee in a library. Upon arrival, Kelnaka, misunderstanding the concept of a low profile, rips a panel from the walls with the finesse of a child tearing into a birthday present. Channeling their inner historians, they surmise that the fortress was once a mining site. Indara proposes that she investigate alone. The others, however, are having none of it, insisting on a group adventure. Despite her reservations about overwhelming the locals with a Jedi parade, Indara relents after Sol points out their glaring numerical disadvantage, 50 witches to a measly 1.
It's too risky to go in as a group. They'll take it as a threat.
There are over 50 of them.
Fine.
Which is kind of ironic, considering she ends up single-handedly wiping them all out later in the episode, but more on that later. They step into the courtyard to find the warrior witches, armed and as welcoming as one might expect from individuals confronted by uninvited people into their home. Master Indara does the introductions, which goes about as well as a bantha in a china shop.
You're trespassing.
We thought this planet was uninhabited.
The all-knowing Jedi were ignorant of their surroundings.
At the same time, Mother Anastasia singles out Torben for a mind game that would make even the most seasoned Sith jealous. Torben finds himself the star of a psychological thriller, trapped in a courtyard of illusions where Anastasia probes his deepest desires and insecurities.
Good Jedi, but you have natural desires you suppress. I would not keep you from what you want. I would always let you have what you need. Kneel.
I was always really hit by Obi-Wan's line in A New Hope when he says Vader was seduced by the dark side. That made me feel weird because I was a kid and I didn't really understand what that word meant. And then later when I did, I was like, what's he talking about? So with the way that...
Here, the boy is tempted by Anasay's promise of escape from Brendok's dreary confines, and his struggle culminates in his eyes turning a sinister black as he begins to succumb to her influence, much to the horror of his companions. Amidst this mind-bending showdown, a subplot unfolds with Osha pleading for a chance to take the Jedi test, a request that Indara supports once again. Ultimately, Anasay agrees to release Torben and arrange for the children's testing, but the damage has been done to the Padawan. As Indara tends to Torben back on their ship, who's very much still rattled from the telepathic incursion, she mulls over Sol's suggestion to test the local twin witches, May and Osha. The idea, she figures, might just give her the perfect excuse to hit pause and consult the Jedi Council for advice. Meanwhile, Sol is having a moment. He confesses a budding paternal instinct towards Osha, convinced she's Jedi material and perhaps his destined Padawan. But Indara dampens his enthusiasm, with a reminder that the Coven's insular and creepy vibe might complicate a simple join the Jedi pitch.
I feel she's meant to be my Padawan.
Her Coven will never let her leave. They are so insular, so strange.
I believe she wants to live with us.
Do not confuse what Osha wants with what you want.
The next day, Torben, emerging from his meditation like a monk with a mission, finds himself greeting the twins and a retinue of scouts at the starship. He ushers May inside and takes a blood sample, once again, something we already saw in Episode 3. In the medbay, May performs a Jedi test with the precision of a stormtrooper out of shooting range.
A castle, a planet, a necklace.
The image hasn't appeared yet.
The images are met with wildly incorrect guesses, prompting disappointment from Sol, who's aware that she's failing on purpose. Displaying the enthusiasm of someone utterly oblivious to the stakes, May casually inquires about going home mid-test. Seizing the moment, Indara probes about the mysterious ceremony they witnessed. Here, May reveals that it was an Ascension ritual, a sort of witch coming of age that apparently includes forehead markings and lofty expectations. When Indara skeptically questions the wisdom of children leading a coven, May's shrug could rival that of any teenager asked about their homework.
But your children, how can you become the leaders?
I don't know.
The girl then perplexes them with her ominous recital about walking through fear and destiny's sacrificial demands. So at this point, not only did Anasay invade Torben's mind and forever scar him, but the Jedi are faced with the revelation that the kids might be sacrificed, further strengthening Sol's position that they are in danger.
You and your sister are special, Osha. I want you to stay special.
Come, claim your destiny.
Do you vow upon my death to protect the secrets of our coven and continue our legacy?
I, too. Mama said everyone must walk through fear. Everyone must be sacrificed to fulfill their destiny.
Sensing a plot twist thicker than Wookiee fur, Sol speculates that May was instructed to fail her exam, a test about as straightforward as a Rancor's diet plan, especially when you have full sensibility, and convinces Indara to let him tweak the approach for Osha.
There are other children there?
Thousands like us. But you must have the courage to say what you want. Osha passed.
I will meet you at the camp when I hear their answer.
During Osha's examination, Sol tries to inspire her with tales of thousands of other Jedi children, urging her to embrace honesty over evasion. Osha, perhaps moved by Sol's pep talk or simply eager to advance the plot, declares her desire to join the Jedi, once again. As the space opera rehash drags on, Indara, still skeptical, sends Torben to analyze the twins' blood samples, revealing a plot twist that George Lucas would have scrapped for being too outlandish. Turns out the girls are not twins, but are artificially created beings, sharing a symbiont and boasting an incomprehensible midichlorian count.
The twins were artificially created?
Maybe by tapping into a power dense enough to split one consciousness into two bodies?
I want to have my own things. But why? Because we're not the same. Of course we are.
Meanwhile, back at the camp, as Kilnaka plays chef, because what else would a Wookiee do in a filler episode, the group digests more than just their dinner. Master Indara, fresh from a buzz-killing chat with the Jedi Council, dashes any hope of whisking the girls away to Coruscant, citing non-interference policies that apparently apply selectively across the episodes. Torben, still nursing a headache from earlier telepathic attacks, begins to sulk at the news, despite it meaning that they can now leave, which was his only desire, while Sol contemplates a futile chat with the Council. Indara then chides Sol for his growing attachment to Osha as he declares that only a vergence, a sort of cosmic confluence of force energy, could produce beings as uniquely powerful as the twins, who aren't really twins until the story needs them to be, before they're not, when the story needs them not to be. This revelation sends Torben, fueled by a mix of fear and haste, zooming off in a speeder bike, convinced that the twins are the key to wrapping up their extended planetary stay.
Don't you see? We just need proof of emergence, and those girls are the proof. This is our ticket home!
Bear in mind that his one goal is to get off the planet. The Jedi Council have told them not to interfere, which means that they can now leave, but Torben decides to head back to the heavily armed fortress filled with witches, because the writers have not only forgotten his motivation, but have also thrown logic out the door.
What kind of nonsense is this? It's insulting.
His impulsive race to prove that the Vergence exists and get back to Coruscant escalates from 0 to reckless in seconds, mirroring the episode's own pacing problems in convolution. We should also note that they already have blood samples of the girls and their midichlorian count, which should be enough proof that the Vergence exists, so I'm not sure why this wasn't sent off to the Council. Indara, in a managerial scramble, dispatches Sol after him, while she and Kelnaka opt for the slow but steady approach in their starship. At the witch's Brendok fortress, domestic drama unfolds.
Go and take a walk, May. Take a walk with Mother Coral. Now!
Mama! What's wrong with you?
Osha and May's quarrel escalates until Mother Anastasia intervenes, promising a heart-to-heart about Osha's Jedi aspirations, a conversation that's more about emotional manipulation than maternal concern.
Good girl. Get mad.
Meanwhile, in an act that feels both petty and corruptive, Coral encourages May to channel her inner Sith by tapping into her anger and doing what must be done to stop Osha from leaving. Another indication that Sol was absolutely right about the girls being in danger here.
Let me see your war face. Sir! You got a war face? Ah! That's a war face! Now let me see your war face! Ah!
Back in the Witch's common room, tensions boil among the Coven, who voice their disapproval of Anasai's leniency towards Osha's Jedi dreams.
I want to be a Jedi, Mama. I do.
A plot to lock down the fortress then unfolds as May, in a fit of fury, sabotages the elevator control panel and declares a lockdown. The witches then rally, preparing for what they anticipate to be an imminent Jedi assault.
Get everyone in the common room. Prepare for battle.
On the ground, Sol catches up with Torben at the jammed elevator and senses the girls need their help. The pair, now united in their mission, scout for alternative routes up the fortress, as Sol, tapping into his Jedi serenity, guides Torben past his previous psychic scarring from Anasai's mind games. As Indara and Kelnaka hover in their starship above the Witch's fortress, because apparently Jedi starships can't land in the presence of plot-induced obstacles, Indara sends Kelnaka down to prevent Torben from exacerbating an already volatile situation.
There's no way that we can land the ship there. If I can get close enough, do you think you can make the jump? Go.
Coral informs Mother Anastasia of the Jedi's breach, stirring a debate between peace and protection as Anastasia resists violence, despite literally violating Torben's mind the day before. Meanwhile, May, in a moment of melodramatic angst, locks Osha away and sets her journal on fire, resulting in an inferno that somehow engulfs the stone fortress and narrative coherence. Cut to Sol and Torben, who confront Anastasia and Coral, along with an array of witches ominously lining a catwalk. While trying to maintain a semblance of diplomacy, Sol questions the origin of the twins, triggering the archers to notch their arrows. This rightfully prompts Torben to ready his lightsaber.
Take another step and it will be your last.
Help!
Osha!
Just then, May bursts onto the scene, seeking help for the fire that she caused.
I'll kill you.
While Sol, mistaking her for Osha, calls out, only to be met by Coral's spear-wielding wrath. Anastasia, in a display of smoke and mirrors, literally transforms into black smoke, enveloping herself and May, and presuming the girl was in danger, which she was, Sol plunges his lightsaber through the smoke, killing Anastasia. Her dying revelation, that she was prepared to honor her daughter's wish to follow the Jedi, comes across as moot, given she could have led with that at the very start instead of turning into some kind of monstrosity.
come with noble intentions.
You wish to know if we will allow Osha to join you. I was going to let Osha go.
Oh, I think you should lead with that next time.
As the structure succumbs to explosions, because no self-respecting witch fortress can have a simple fire, Osha finds her way out through a conveniently overlooked tunnel. In a final twist, Coral disappears with the archers, leaving behind a taunt that echoes through the fortress.
You should not have brought him here.
My mind is fortified.
Not you.
Torben's assurance of his mental fortitude is immediately undercut by the reveal of a possessed Kelnaka, whose eyes have turned an ominous black. The action spirals into chaos as Kelnaka, possessed by the witch's mind control, turns into a rampaging Wookiee, wreaking havoc on Sol and Torben. The battle kicks off with Kelnaka, hurling Sol against a wall with the grace of a galactic linebacker, and then proceeding to choke Torben against another wall. Because when you're possessed, walls are apparently the go-to for traumatic effect. Amidst the scuffle, Torben earns a set of scratch marks from Kelnaka's claws, adding injury to insult. Just when things are beginning to look dire, Sol intervenes, distracting Kelnaka long enough to break his chokehold on Torben. The fight continues until Indara, jumping into the fray, tackles Kelnaka to the ground. She uses her force powers to wrestle control of Kelnaka's mind from the witches, causing their telepathic powers to rebound and knock them out cold. No, seriously, they all just die in the most hilarious sequence in the entire series.
Miss Keisha. Miss Keisha. Miss Keisha. Oh my fucking god, she fucking dead.
Each witch drops like a poorly scripted plot twist, with no clear explanation as to what just happened. Did Indara zap them into oblivion, or was it a tragic case of overexertion? The series opts to leave us in the dark, much like a Sith hiding in the shadows. Oh wait, that destruction of canon is not until the next episode. Meanwhile, inside the fortress, Sol rushes to prevent a catastrophic structural failure as the generator explodes. Sol's decision-making during the bridge scene epitomizes the episode's reliance on contrived drama. Instead of using his abilities to simply pull both girls to safety, he opts to hold up the collapsing structure itself, a choice that seems more about theatrical effect than practical Jedi strategy, while May and Osha's reactions, limited to screaming each other's names rather than attempting any self-rescue, turn what could have been a gripping survival scene into a frustrating display of passivity. All they have to do is just walk off to the opposite side and they would have been fine. As the bridge gives way, he then opts to focus on Osha, allowing May to fall into the abyss. Back aboard the Jedi starship, the aftermath is as tense as a budget Senate hearing. Kelnaka paces outside the medbay, contemplating the nuances of Wookiee liability, while Sol tends to a respirator-bound Osha. Torben, now sporting battle scars and a bruised ego, exchanges apologies with Master Indara, who's none too pleased with his impetuousness. In a moment of crisis management, Indara decides to spin the narrative for the Jedi Council, blaming the entire fiery debacle on May and conveniently omitting their own part in the escalation.
Before you throw yourself at the mercy of the Council, ask yourself why you made this choice.
Wrapped in a mix of guilt and defiance, Sol is reprimanded by Indara, who advises him to reflect on his choices before daring to face the Council with the truth.
I must face the Council.
Why would you do that to her? We will tell the Council the truth. May burned down the witch's fortress, and everyone was lost.
As the episode closes, Osha, confused and calling for her mother, is soothed by Sol's reassurance that they're en route to Coruscant, while he gently shifts the blame onto May for starting the fire, which she did. What's bizarre is that there was no need for them to lie to the Council, as the Jedi did nothing wrong. May told them that the Ascension ceremony requires self-sacrifice, indicating the girls were in danger. Anisea messed with Torben's mind, leading to his impetuous decision to speed off to the fortress. Sol only entered again after sensing Osha was in danger, which she was.
I'll kill you.
Torben did nothing wrong to warrant him taking his own life, as the rest of the episode was spent with him fending off arrows and attacks from the possessed Kelnaka. Sol only attacked Anisea because she turned into a smoke monster and was causing May to disintegrate before his very eyes. Hell, even Indara was trying to sever the connection and restore Kelnaka's mind, which somehow led to all the witches dying. And May not only started the fire, but locked all the doors, preventing anyone from leaving, so the culpability is with her and Coral.
The Jedi will not warn you before they attack.
Liar!
I'm Master Indara. These are my colleagues, Sol, Kelnaka, and my Padawan, Torben. Forgive our intrusion.
It was foolish to come back here, Jedi.
We come with noble intentions.
Meanwhile,
If you want your Padawan returned to his right mind, I suggest you all leave. Now.
Well, well, well. How the turntables...
Despite this, the show wants us to believe that the Jedi are the bad guys when they're not. Keep this in mind as the next episode continues to gaslight Sol into thinking he did anything wrong.
Fight me!
Anasay's manipulation of Torben could have hinted at her grander, darker schemes, suggesting she might be steering events towards a violent climax to serve her own mysterious ends. However, the show doesn't commit to this angle. Instead, it backtracks, portraying Anasay as a figure more inclined to peace and compromise than her counterpart Coral, despite her actions literally contradicting this. This inconsistency not only confuses her character's motives, but also makes the audience question the direction of the plot.
You may be their mother, but you are also our leader.
Right now, I choose mother.
Like, as a writer, you know why you're doing something thematically. You can definitely justify, especially a choice like that one. You can also justify it character-wise, narratively-wise, personally, you know, feeling bifurcated as a person, as a human, as a woman. Like, you can make all of those choices, but somebody has to actually do it.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Ultimately, Episode 7 tries to unwrap the enigma of that night on Brendok, but ends up tangling itself in its own narrative web. The flashback was aimed to shed light on the Jedi's decision-making in a crisis involving the Dark Coven of Witches, yet it reduces these potentially complex motivations to a series of impulsive, poorly explained actions.
I told you we cannot use violence.
And I told you I would die before I let the Jedi take my children.
Do not alter this little girl's destiny because you have formed an emotional attachment to her.
That is not what's happening here.
The episode missed a golden opportunity to delve into the ideological battle between the Jedi and the Witches, opting instead for an underwhelming revelation that feels as rushed as a pod racer speeding towards the finish line.
Someday, those noble intentions you all have will destroy every Jedi in the galaxy.
I'm in agony.
Sol, in a moment that was teasing transparency, appeared ready to spill all at the close of Episode 6. However, the likelihood that Osha is going to get the same information from him, given her current company with Khmer, is slim. Instead of leveraging the present with May and Osha's divergent paths, we're stuck in a time loop, watching the same events unfold with minimal new insights, beyond a confirmation that the Jedi were in the right, despite the show framing them as the bad guys throughout.
He had nothing to be guilty about. The only way that episode or that scene would have been justified is if we'd seen him committing some atrocious act, but he didn't. Everything was in self-defense. Mother Anasaya invaded him, invaded his mind. The witches fired arrows at him. He didn't harm any of them.
Are we saying are the Jedis the bad guys, or Mr. H and his crew tonight said it was the witches they were the bad ones, not the Jedi. But the way it's framed, it's like the Jedi are the bad guys, but they're not, are they?
No, the way they're trying to frame it is if the Jedi are the bad guys, but by what's been depicted, they're actually not. They're completely justified in everything they did.
As the episode wrapped up, we're left not with the satisfaction of mysteries unraveled, but with the frustration of having navigated a labyrinthine plot that, rather than cleverly laying out its twists, seems to have misplaced its own map. And then there's the frickin' song. Ending an episode of a Star Wars series with a Victoria Monet pop track might just be the boldest move the ACOLYTE has made. Bold, but not wise or fitting. It just feels out of sync, like many aspects of this show, a peculiar choice in a series that's already struggling to maintain its footing. The only positive I'll give this episode is that it does offer the first substantial interaction among the four Jedi, filling in glaring character gaps that have persisted throughout the series. Earlier episodes left viewers in the dark about these key characters, a choice that, while aiming for mystery, often felt more like aimlessness. But this belated introduction does little to amend the initial oversight of failing to provide viewers with a connection to these characters prior to their untimely deaths, and I still don't feel like I understand who they are and what they stand for.
I 100% agree with you. Kelnacker had zero personality. For the first ever live-action Jedi Wookiee, he was pretty forgettable, wasn't he?
Yeah.
What a shame.
The only time he had a semblance of personality was when he wasn't himself.
Yes.
I love a Wookiee. They're my favorite characters in all of Star Wars. And I was like, cool, this one's a Jedi. And then he died.
And it was like, bye, off screen death. The worst kind of death.
Oh my God! He admitted! You yourself admitted yourself that you suck.
That's true.
You have the good ideas.
Shut up.
The episode's purpose seems to be to offer some closure regarding Sol's profound remorse over past events. We learn that Sol's regret stems from two pivotal actions: the killing of May and Osha's mother, an event awkwardly executed, and his decisive moment to save Osha at the expense of May during the crisis. But once again, he still did nothing wrong, and was merely faced with an impossible decision that forced him to choose between the lesser of two evils.
The witches prepare for a ceremony tonight. What if the girls are in danger? I want to do what's best for Osha.
You don't get to decide that.
But you must have the courage to say what you want.
I want to be a Jedi. I told him I wanted to be a Jedi because I do.
You don't mean that.
I do.
But there's something dangerous about those women. You saw what they were capable of.
You can feel the twins are not safe.
They say that we have interfered too much already.
Ascension is about walking through fear. It is about sacrificing a part of yourself.
I wanted to save you both.
What happened that night wasn't your fault, Sol.
The season finale of The Acolyte doesn't just disappoint, but seems to underscore a creative direction that's more concerned with setting up sequels than delivering a coherent, engaging story. In the latest installment of Galactic Missteps, Jedi Edition, Osha meditates with Kamia's helmet in a cave, a setting as inauspicious as the plot is convoluted. As visions consume her, Gamir, who's been less a mentor and more a harbinger of bad decisions, panics when his eyes turn the color of void space black. He then wrestles the helmet from her head, bringing her back from the brink. Post-convulsion, Osha shares her vision of her sister May murdering Master Sol, which, when understanding the context of the ending, doesn't make sense.
She had a saber in her hand, but she didn't use it.
This is the future you saw.
We later learn this is a vision of Osha herself, and given the fact that she's wearing her sister's clothes and May's now dressed as her, Osha knows damn well that the vision is of herself. Despite the grim prophecy, Osha remains optimistic about changing the future, and Kamir suggests they head to where Sol and May are. What's odd is that he was very forceful and imposing with May, but when it comes to Osha, he seems to literally and figuratively hold her hand and go along with whatever she wants to do.
Forgive me, I was weak.
You've always been weak.
I can still stop her.
So we go together and see who gets to her first.
You should be trained. Would you ever consider?
No,
Last chance.
I'm not my sister.
Cut to Master Sol, who pilots his starship Poland GX-8 above May's homeworld of Brendok, where May, ever the reluctant guest, is strapped to a medbay bed. Sol essentially plans to use May and Osha to prove the existence of a vergence on Brendok.
There is a vergence on this planet. Now that you and Osha are both alive, I can prove it.
This is despite the previous episode showing they already had blood samples of May and Osha, in addition to the planet now teeming with life being evidence enough.
It doesn't make sense.
May confronts him about Anastae's death and the subsequent Jedi cover-up. Using the pip droid, she then frees herself, countering Sol's narrative with her own version, blaming the Jedi for the deadly fire and everyone's demise at Brendok. As Sol laments his failure to save both sisters, May stuns him with Pip and makes an escape down the corridor. The chase then moves to space, with May piloting an escape pod through an asteroid belt around one of Brendok's moons. Not only does she mention he's too big to follow her, which he appears not to be, but it doesn't make sense why he doesn't merely chase her from above the thin asteroid belt, avoiding damage to his ship. This is when Basil the Bastard, perhaps fed up with Sol's piloting, rips out several wires, causing a spectacular loss of control. What the hell is Basil's motivation here?
Did you cut the brakes again? Yep. God damn it, Charlie! Why would you do that? That's just what I do! Wild card, bitches! What?
He was supposed to be helping the Jedi, but instead continues to undermine him. First by spending all of Episode 6 hiding the fact that May was pretending to be Osha, and now by stopping Sol from disabling her ship, which inadvertently causes Sol to crash into May, almost leading to her death. What's worse is that this is never resolved, with Sol never discussing this with a tracker at any point later in the episode.
Like, he has no... I don't understand what Basil's in the show for.
Yeah,
he has no motive. That, yeah. He just sort of hops around doing shit for fucking reasons.
And Sol doesn't confront him. Sol doesn't confront him for what he did. There's no conversation had afterwards as if, with him saying, Basil, why did you do that? It just... The story just continues. Everybody just forgets about that.
There's no recognition of what just happened. This beaver has just sabotaged you. And by the way, ensured that Squid Game dies.
May's ship, now free from Sol's pursuit, crashes into the atmosphere of Brendok, a visual metaphor perhaps for the show's own narrative trajectory. This is the second time a ship has crashed into an atmosphere and skidded to safety without exploding, first with Osha in Episode 2, and now with May, straining believability. It just happens because the story needs it to, like many other plot points in the series. This episode layers one improbable scenario on top of another, blending false character motivations with overly convenient plot devices, leaving us to navigate the debris field of what might generously be called storytelling. We then find ourselves back at the Jedi Temple, where Padawan Mogadana, in a spectacular failure of protocol, lets Senator Raincourt walk into the control room.
I have the authority to take independent action if there's no larger threat.
How can you know there is no larger threat?
All the victims were Jedi.
There are multiple victims?
Raincourt, cutting to the chase with the subtlety of a blaster shot, accuses Venestra of conducting a murder investigation without Senate oversight, while Venestra, defending her discretion, suggests that no larger threat necessitates Senate involvement, yet. The revelation that there are multiple Jedi dead piques Raincourt's interest, prompting him to probe further into whether the suspect might also wear a robe. The conversation takes a personal turn when Raincourt questions whether she thinks his campaign for an external review of the Order is a personal vendetta.
I think the Jedi are a massive system of unchecked power, posing as a religion.
Venestra confirms her distaste for him, leading Raincourt to lambast the Jedi as an unchecked power, masquerading as a religion, dubbing them a delusional cult in control of everything but their own emotions. This fires up a debate about the Jedi's veneer of goodness and the ticking time bomb of their supposed restraint. As Raincourt exits, he drops the bombshell of a possible tribunal and his report to Supreme Chancellor Drellick.
The majority of my colleagues can't imagine a galaxy without the Jedi, and I can understand why. When you're looking up to heroes, you don't have to face what's right in front of you.
Meanwhile, on a rocky shore far from political intrigue, Osha and Kamir traverse a stony causeway to his starship. Holding her cards close, Osha challenges Kamir's fairness, reminding him of his deal with her sister May and asserting her conditions for their continued partnership. Kamir, in a bid to recruit Osha as his student, faces her refusal as she firmly states she's not her sister. But if you remember what was said in the previous episode, she literally is. They're not twins, but the same person.
They are twins?
No, exactly the same.
Her rebuttal leaves Kamir admiring her resolve, a stark contrast to May's impulsive agreement in the past. But as they depart, a cloaked figure implied to be Darth Plagueis watches their ship vanish into the cosmos, adding yet another layer of unnecessary mystery to an already convoluted plot. What is Darth Plagueis doing here? Is he Kamir's master? Are they trying to infer that Kamir is actually Palpatine? Was he hiding as Kamir tried to seduce Osha by skinny dipping? I have no idea. While I've read much discourse about the show being a standalone, self-contained narrative that doesn't trifle with the established canon, this can't be true, given that they've now inserted Emperor Palpatine's mentor into the show. This means that the ability to manipulate the Force to create life, which Palpatine had learned from his master, came from Darth Plagueis likely learning this from Osha.
She created life. I believe she used the Force to create you and Osha.
Write that down! Write that down!
Over on Brendok, Master Sol lands near the fortress, haunted by the spectre of his past decisions. After flipping the transponder switch to announce his presence to the Jedi, he exits his ship with a look that could only be described as, "Please get me out of this show." Don't worry, they will, but not in the honorable way you deserved, you Chad.
Gather as many knights as you can without raising alarm.
You anticipate a confrontation?
A resolution.
Responding to news that Sol has turned up on Brendok, Venestra mobilizes with the urgency of someone who knows far more than she's letting on. She orders Padawan Mogadana to ready the starship and recruit multiple Jedi Knights discreetly, hinting at her anticipation of more than just a peaceful reunion. How is she able to mobilize a garrison of Jedi without the Council being notified? Does she think they will not speak about what they witness? The show never acknowledges this. Simultaneously, Kamir's ship makes a dramatic entry into Brendok's atmosphere. Osha, commandeering the ship, rebuffs Kamir's attempt to take control, asserting her authority with a quick deactivation of the controls. I don't understand what the design of this ship is. How does it have 2 pilots, and why would Kamir ever put himself in a position where he doesn't have control?
Ask yourself why you made this choice.
I don't know, those were the things that I was interested in.
Sol, now a ghost of his former self, roams the fortress's eerie corridors. His solitary search is contrasted by Osha's approach to the base, where she opts to repair the elevator rather than scale the walls, a decision met with Kamir's vanishing act, his voice lingering like a bad echo. And then we have Sol not being able to sense that May was hiding a few feet away from him, despite his ability to sense that Osha was in danger in the previous episode from hundreds of feet away. Considering the show explained that the girls are not only Force sensitive, but also not twins but effectively the same person, he should have no problem figuring out where she was. If you really think about it, none of what's been happening makes any sense. For example, the controls that Osha hacks into shouldn't be able to work as a generator and electricals blew up in the flashback episode before. And considering Kamir's motivation was to turn Osha to the dark side, why would he disappear and leave her alone?
This show is so inconsistent with the Force sensitivity and abilities of the Jedi, because in one moment, Sol can sense the twins' presence, and in this moment, where he's right, like a few feet away from May, he can't sense her. Like, none of this makes sense.
Because he hops out of the ship when he lands and senses which direction to go, doesn't he?
Exactly, yeah. And Vanessa does the same thing. When Vanessa arrives with the Jedi, she tells them they're this way, so she's obviously able to sense them.
And there's a deeper problem with that as well, because the point of these two twins, as this episode finally confirms, though the previous episode basically set it all up anyway, is that they are functionally speaking the same person as far as the Force is concerned. And yet the entire story of the previous episode is that he only feels a deep connection to Osha, despite the fact that she is, in terms of the Force and her connection to it, the same as May.
As the show layers mystery upon mystery, we find ourselves needing a flowchart to keep track of who's haunted, who's hunting, and what everyone's motivations are with all the flip-flopping that's happening. Sol quickly finds himself embroiled in a lightsaber ballet with Kamir. As he shouts for May in the echoing corridors of the fortress, Kamir, equipped with a Cortosis helmet and dual lightsabers, appears, thanking Sol for unwittingly leading him to May, which is simply stupid, as it was Osha and her vision that literally led him here. Hell, she even piloted him to Brendok. The writers are not only forgetting to pay attention to the continuity of events from previous episodes, but appear to forget what happens earlier in this episode itself. And his goal is to convert Osha, not May, who he was trying to kill in episode 5.
But this one went back on our deal. She exposed me, so now I have to kill every single last one of you.
Why do the writers keep forgetting the objectives and motivations of these characters? I mean, there's only a few of them left now. The ensuing battle is a dance of blue and red blades, with both combatants leaping from a bridge like participants in the galaxy's most lethal gymnastics routine, and landing with the grace of force-cushioned cats. In the courtyard, Sol, ever the gentleman, warns that he will destroy Kamir if necessary, while Kamir taunts Sol by saying not if Osha gets to him first, before hurling his lightsabers like deadly boomerangs. Showcasing his Jedi reflexes and skills, Sol dodges encounters, pushing the sabers and Kamir away.
All of this death, everything that happened here, all because you didn't want me to become a Jedi.
Meanwhile, Osha confronts May in their burnt childhood bedroom. The air is thick with accusations and grief, as May tries to convince Osha that the real villain is Sol, who she claims killed their mother.
Sol killed our mother. I saw it. He's lied to you every day since you left our home.
The reunion devolves into a physical confrontation, with May playing defense against Osha's offensive. What's bizarre is that despite their divergent paths, Osha is a Jedi mechanic and May's an assassin, they exhibit identical fighting styles. This mirrored combat strains believability, given their vastly different training backgrounds, and it's simply in here because the creators thought it looked cool, not because the fighting is being used to tell a story about the characters themselves. Above them, the sudden arrival of Master Venestra's ship casts a shadow over the Brendok fortress, briefly distracting Osha and giving May the ability to vanish. An ability which would have been handy in episode 5 when she was running away from Kamir.
Coward. You're going to betray me.
Why are you running?
Outside, Sol and Kamir continue their dance of death under the looming presence of Venestra's ship. Sol declares Kamir will pay for his sins, then unfazed, Kamir hints that the Jedi reinforcements might not be there for him. What he's alluding to is Venestra's plan to apprehend Sol and effectively frame him for everything that happened, which I need to remind you he can't possibly know, because we as the audience don't even know this yet.
You.
Sol eventually gains the upper hand, damaging Kamir's lightsaber and forcing him to remove his helmet in defeat. In the same way that Osha stopped Sol from killing Kamir in episode 5, this time, May interrupts, throwing Sol into a brief hand-to-hand skirmish that ends with her disarming him. Bear in mind, Kamir is a ruthless murderer that killed multiple Jedi that were literally trying to protect May from him. So this is another incomprehensible move from May, whose actions and motivations flip from scene to scene.
Wild card, bitches!
Kamir, ever the instigator, goads May to finish Sol, framing it as the final step in her Sith training. Wait a minute, I thought he gave up on May and was now trying to convert Osha.
Did you give the same pitch to my sister?
I made a mistake with May. I thought she wanted more than just revenge.
May, however, discards the lightsaber, aiming instead for a moral victory by demanding Sol confess his sins to the Senate and Jedi Council, which he was already planning on doing. All she's done is disarm him and preventing from stopping Kamir once and for all, while also leaving him open to attack because the story needs it to happen, not because it's what her character should do in this situation.
Strike him down, and your journey will be complete.
He must stand trial.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
He copied my whole fucking flow! Word for word, bar for bar!
As the confrontation unfolds, Sol reveals a bombshell. May and Osha are not twins, but the same person, split by the Vergence on Brendok. He claims their creation was the handiwork of Mother Anastasia using dark sorcery, as Osha, sneaking up behind the group, grabs his lightsaber, while May accuses him of their mother's murder.
You killed our mother.
Yes, I did.
A guilt-ridden Sol confesses, justifying his actions as protective, which we know is true. With Osha confronting Sol about his silence all these years, he explains the answer is a mix of Jedi bureaucracy and a poorly timed consideration of her feelings, claiming that he was merely acting in what he believed to be her best interest. Considering she was an artificially created person influenced by the dark side of the Force, he knew the Jedi would not only refuse to accept her into their ranks, but that she would be ostracized.
I did what I thought was best for you. I wanted to tell you so many times, but I couldn't.
But before he can explain the context of Anasai's death and how she literally turned into a smoke monster, causing May to disintegrate before his very eyes, his emotional confession is cut short, quite literally, as Osha force chokes him to death. Sol resignedly accepts his fate, uttering,
"It's okay."
A moment that underscores his resignation more than it does Osha's wrath, who continues to have one bloody facial expression throughout this entire show. There you have it, folks. Now, not only were May and Osha the first beings created by the Force, but Osha, who's had no formal training in the dark side, is now the first person to canonically have a Force vision of the future and use a Force choke.
The Jedi are going to take some L's, and people are going to die. And especially Jedi who have experienced, interactions with Sith on this show are going to die. So, spoiler alert.
People are dying.
People are dead.
I just hate that no character is able to take responsibility for their actions, except for Sol, who did nothing wrong and had nothing to apologize for, and is killed nonetheless. As Sol meets his maker, his kyber crystal weeps and the lightsaber changes from Jedi blue to Sith red. Meanwhile, Venestra makes her grand entrance. Joined by a squad of Jedi, she's able to sense Kamir's presence, a feeling undoubtedly mutual as he dons his Cortosis helmet with the urgency of someone late to a masquerade. It's here that I realized that if Master Sol and the others had simply probed into Kamir's mind in episode 2, they would have been able to sense he was corrupted. There, they would have apprehended him, preventing further deaths and Osha's turn to the dark side. And if you really think about it, they apprehended Osha, suspecting that she might have murdered Indara, but when they were faced with Khmer, who was confirmed to have been complicit in the murder of 2 Jedi Masters, they even offered to let him go.
We will consider letting you go with a warning.
Okay, thank you. Please don't do the memory wipe thing or whatever it is you guys do.
This is the bloody problem with this show. All you have to do is look back and stress test plot points and character actions to see that more often than not, characters say and do whatever the story needs them to in order to move things along, without considering what decision they would actually make as that character. Back at the fortress, May urges Osha to flee the scene, while Venestra and her Jedi entourage cram into the elevator. I need to point out another inconsistency here. In the previous flashback, we saw that Sol, Indara, Torben, and Kelnaka couldn't open the door, forcing the Wookiee to hotwire the cables to let them in. Yet here, Venestra simply uses the Force to open it. It's incomprehensible how inconsistent the writing is, from what the characters are capable of doing when the scene needs them to the varied motivations and actions which change from scene to scene. As May and Osha descend into a core tunnel, Master Venestra discovers Sol's body. Surrounded by the echoes of that fateful night, she orchestrates a pursuit and tells the other Jedi to begin their search.
Recently, when the truth threatened to come out, a rogue Jedi named Sol killed his accomplices.
I see through the lies of the Jedi.
Now, bear in mind that she's able to sense exactly what went down 16 years ago, but somehow the other Jedi Masters and Knights can't sense the same thing, which of course conveniently enables her to fabricate a lie about what transpired to the Council and Senate. The narrative then takes a stroll through forests of confusion and memory manipulation, with May and Osha seeking solace under the branches of their childhood bunta tree. May admits to starting the fire that began much of the turmoil, while Osha regrets her disbelief in her sister. May still nearly killed her, but the show doesn't want to address this.
How convenient is that? Wow.
Their discussion is cut short by the sudden appearance of Khmer, who warns the pair of their vulnerability to Jedi detection. This sets the stage for Osha's dilemma. Confess Sol's past misdeeds to the Jedi, or heed Khmer's cryptic caution about her own latent powers. Khmer then ups the ante by offering to erase May's memories, an act he pitches as a protective measure, but reeks of sinister intentions. While May started a fire that nearly killed Osha in an attempt to prevent her from joining the Jedi, she says that she was wrong in doing that, and would now allow Osha to join the Sith without interference. So her character development is essentially her killing multiple Jedi, culminating by her advising her sister to turn to the dark side.
I want to do it because it's fun. It's fun to do bad things.
As the Jedi, led by Basil, close in on their location, Osha, torn between familial loyalty and a dubious bargain, reluctantly allows Khmer to alter May's memories, erasing the painful past but also her identity.
They say I killed someone, but I don't remember.
Basil's loyalties have seemingly flipped once again without explanation, suggesting his allegiances are as transactional as the narrative itself. With the memories of May effectively erased, she won't be held accountable for not only the fire, but for the callous murder of all the Jedi she hunted. Of course, because the story still needs her character to be relevant, this isn't a full mind wipe. It's selective lobotomization, given she still remembered key aspects. Which begs the question, what was the point of it all, beyond removing her culpability for accountability? Especially given an interrogation of her droid will eventually reveal the truth, a glaring oversight by Khmer. It's just a series of nonsensical events and narrative filler. The decision of Osha to part ways with her sister, under the condition of memory erasure, feels contrived and undermines the entire season's efforts to reunite them.
Do it. Quickly. I can't lose you again.
Sorry.
The Jedi arrive shortly after, finding an amnesiac May who's as clueless about her past crimes as the audience is about the show's direction. The morality of Osha's decision to align with Khmer, a known murderer of her friends and allies, is dubious. Her willingness to overlook his past atrocities for personal gain paints a troubling portrait of her character evolution, or more accurately, her regression, which would be fine if the show acknowledged this was a bad thing.
Going back to your question about the twins and the theme of that, you're going to see two sides of almost every character. Almost every character has two sides, as we know. I mean, that's all what all Star Wars is about, right? Like There's light and dark in everybody, and it's all about the balance of that.
But it's a lot about good and evil. It's a lot about heroes.
It's about good and evil, but heroes, what makes a hero? Yeah. What's friendship? What's the idea of sacrificing yourself for something larger? Yeah. They're all really basic things. They say, well, we don't have to make a movie about that. It's very obvious, but it's actually not. It's not that obvious to a lot of people unless you have somebody tell you every generation, this is what we believe in.
Back at the Jedi Temple, May, devoid of memories but dressed in plot armor, faces an inquiry by Master Venestra. Venestra reveals that the man in May's memory was none other than Master Soul, described as...
He was a kind, brilliant, compassionate man.
Who nonetheless committed a terrible act. I beg to differ, but I digress. This is neatly packaged and presented to a Republic tribunal, presided over by Supreme Chancellor Drellick, where Venestra spins a tale of Jedi betrayal 16 years earlier on Brendok. According to her, the person she once described as being a good friend went rogue, killing fellow Jedi to cover up a clash with a force-wielding cult of witches, a story that conveniently paints Soul as a lone villain. This cover-up is worse than the one she was trying to hide, and considering Soul did nothing wrong, to me, Venestra, like May, Osha, and Kamir, is just another villain in a story devoid of hope, optimism, or accountability.
To your point, Robot Head, not only did Indara die before Saul was in the investigation, but she died while Saul was teaching Padawans on Coruscant. So all this council would have to do is go through the logs and see that Saul couldn't have killed Indara because he was there.
And then there's all the Jedi at the temple where...
Yeah, the local Jedi temple who all know what's happened.
They all know what happened.
With Star Wars, it was, the religion, everything was so taken and put into a form that was easy for everybody to accept, so it didn't fall into a contemporary mode where you could argue about it. It went everywhere in the world because they could say, oh, the things I believe in are the same as that. Most people in the world believe exactly the same thing. They share the same beliefs. Yeah. And if you really look at it and you say, well, what's the difference between a Shia and a Sunni? What's the difference between a Catholic and a Protestant? Well, they're really different. Buddha's a little bit different, but in the end, if you think of it as one God, you say, well, everybody expresses it differently, but it's still, basically don't kill people and be compassionate and love people. And so that's basically all Star Wars is.
Nonetheless, Raincourt calls for a full external review of the Order, sensing that the Force might not be so strong with their transparency.
I think in light of these events, Chancellor, we cannot wait for a full Senate vote. An external review of the Jedi must begin immediately.
Meanwhile, Venestra tells May that Soul's secret actions were twisted by selfish love, a revelation that leaves May questioning the existence of her sister Osha. As May's eyes glitter with the weight of this new knowledge, Venestra sees an opportunity to enlist her in the hunt for her elusive former Padawan Kamir, ensuring the cycle continues, regardless of whether we want it to or not.
The Jedi have failed you. I am going to make this right, but I need your help.
Cut to Osha and Kamir, who share a moment staring into the sun, where what should be framed as a horrific turn to the dark side is represented as a hopeful step in a bright new direction. As if the show hadn't already destroyed the established canon, it ends back at the Jedi Temple, where Venestra meets with Master Yoda, who conveniently wasn't able to sense the demise of the Jedi, nor that she had been lying to him. Presumably setting the stage for further sage advice or cryptic warnings, it also opens up the possibility that she might reveal the truth to him, which would be worse as it would make Yoda complicit in another cover-up.
And I've got to say, in all honesty, it's the biggest piece of dog shit.
From the poor script writing, plot holes, contrivances, switches of character motivations and objectives to the lack of continuity, it's hard to say something positive about the show. The Acolyte suffers from a fundamental flaw. It fails to portray its core Jedi characters as genuine heroes. Instead, the series presents them as either ineffectual, stagnant, or worse, corrupt. Even when they're courageous and striving towards good like Soul, the show frames them as evil and deserving of death, and the absence of any Jedi achieving or even striving toward their ideals makes for a very disheartening viewing experience. The show's most egregious fault, however, lies in its central premise. The Acolyte aims to provide a Sith-centric perspective on the Jedi universe, but falls short by not offering any characters of substantial depth. The introduction of Kamir added a bit of intrigue in the middle episodes, yet his character remained superficial, defined only by a vague vendetta against his former master. The brief appearance of Darth Plagueis in the finale suggests Camille's deeper connection to the Sith, yet the show stops short of exploring or clarifying this in any detail. These omissions undermine the narrative's focus on Osha's transition to the dark side, leaving viewers in the dark about the implications of her choices.
I can't lose you again. You're not. You're going to do what you were meant to do.
But when you lose everything, that's when you're finally free.
What do you want, Osha? Let my sister go and I will train with you.
Neither Osha nor May have been developed as compelling characters, making it difficult for viewers to invest in their fates. Venestra, used more as a plot mechanism than a fully realized character, does little to enhance the narrative, beyond making you hate her. And with the death of Sol, the series loses its most substantial element, leaving little anticipation for what might come next.
Sorry, my friend. A mistake he lived with for so long, it twisted his mind. He justified every selfish step with the love he had for your sister.
You expect us to believe this garbage?
And then we have all the bloody plot holes in the story, like Mother Coral, who said she would die before leaving her daughters and disappeared into smoke, never to be seen again. Not to mention the inclusion of Darth Plagueis, who was never acknowledged throughout the show until he's forcefully inserted at the very end, making it feel more akin to last-minute fan service. It's the same with Yoda. He also has no bearing on the plot, and I would have preferred him to have been left out of it.
If you choose the quick and easy path, you will become an agent of evil.
As I mentioned before, one of my main grievances lies in the absence of hope. Traditionally, even the darkest chapters of the Star Wars saga conclude with a glimmer of optimism. In contrast, the Acolyte concludes on a notably despondent note. Osha's descent into darkness is overwhelmingly bleak, leaving a feeling of desolation rather than the anticipated cathartic resolution. This is because the Acolyte intentionally advocates for the dark side, suggesting it's acceptable because it aligns with Osha's desires. What kind of messaging is this to children?
Death is a natural part of life. Rejoice for those around you who transform into the Force. Mourn them do not.
Your master denies you. I would not keep you from what you want. I would always let you have what you need.
For the first time, she's portrayed as choosing her own destiny. However, instead of emphasizing the peril of the dark side, where one might temporarily succumb to it due to weakness or misjudgment, and how a full commitment to darkness is both wrong and dangerous, here it's portrayed as triumphant. The attempt to elicit sympathy for the Sith poses an intriguing contradiction. If the Sith ideology ultimately culminates in the Galactic Empire, a clear allegory for fascism, what are we to make of this narrative sympathy, other than the fact that the show is endorsing the very elements it claims to critique?
I can't lose you again.
Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose.
You are with me. I'm with you. All is one. Born as two.
Attachment leads to jealousy. The shadow of greed, that is.
Overall, the episode illustrates the Acolyte's struggle with pacing, character development, and plot coherence. While it aims to provide closure and set up a dramatic finale, the execution leaves viewers with a mix of disappointment and frustration, reflecting a season that has often felt as disjointed and haphazard as the narrative it attempts to tell. As the Acolyte wraps up its first season, it leaves behind a slew of unresolved plot threads, casting doubt on the efficacy of its storytelling. The prospect of continuing this saga seems unwise, as the first season failed to justify its existence, let alone the necessity for further episodes. The show didn't just fall flat, it seemed to embody all the missteps of modern streaming content, wrapped up in a package of slapdash flashbacks and pacing that seemed designed to stretch content rather than enrich it. The finale compounds all of these issues, concluding the season with an open-ended whimper rather than a definitive bang. The only positive thing I will say about the show is that it's finally over.
It's about time!